So here is part 2 of stuff I look for when finding good sources, scientific paper edition. So this example I'm going to use is of the immunology paper I did a group project on this year. So let's look at that paper. Okay, so this paper was published now 3 years ago, and it is titled Tumor Invasion in Draining Lymph Nodes is Associated with Treg Accumulation in Breast Cancer Patients. For our intents and purposes, the contents of this paper are not important to this video. It's a good paper if you want to go read it, but the content is not important right now. So again, first thing to look at is when this was published. If the paper is like a good 10-20 years old, take it with a bit of a grain of salt because there may have been new up-to-date information found. Not saying that just because it's an older paper it's not a good source. Just maybe look in addition if there's new updated information. Another green flag for this paper is that it is, you can see at the very top up there, open access. That means it is free to read and everyone can read it without having to pay a ridiculous amount of money for access for the paper. And it is not hidden behind a paywall, which is great. There are ways to get around paywalls. You can email the authors themselves to see if they have a draft, or there's also other ways, Sci-Hub. But open access articles are always a green flag. Next also, there is an entire list of authors, as well as if you want to go look, there is additional information on the authors, like where they are currently located, other publications, their qualifications usually, etc., etc. I usually don't look at those, but again, if you are looking for a bit more information, that is available. When looking at the materials and methods, it's a good sign when all of the steps and everything are outlined very clearly in the paper, so it's easily able to be replicated and hopefully the results reproduce. When looking, generally a larger sample size is better. This one specifically had 54 subjects, that's the word, which it is, depending on the study, it can be a bit harder to find a good sample size. This one specifically was only using breast cancer patients, so there's not a ton available, but they probably could have got a bit of a bigger sample size, so that's a little bit breast cancer is unfortunately rather common, so they probably could have got a larger sample size, but whatever. With human trials, it's generally, especially physical ones like cancer research, it's a bit harder to get people to participate, so there's usually a smaller sample size. But when looking at other things, generally the larger the sample size, the better. In addition, it does mention here, since it is human trials, we need to go through a bunch of ethical, jump through a ton of hoops, and they mentioned that they did follow all the hoops, they did all the steps correctly, so that's a good sign. This is ethically harvested cancer patients. So yeah, materials, methods, everything clearly outlined, large sample size, and easy to understand and potentially easy to replicate if necessary. Then in the results section, you want to make sure it's organized easily, the figures are easy to understand and not skewed and biased. Again, the actual content of the results here in this case does not matter, but you can see that it's easily organized, easy to understand, very clearly labeled. And then below in the figure caption, so this is underneath those pictures that I just showed, there is a detailed explanation of each of the figures, what they are showing. So results should be decently easy to understand. Of course, it does help if you have background in the subject, being able to understand it easier, but you should not have to have 6 degrees in a bunch of different fields to be able to understand the results of a scientific study. So yes, maybe a bit of background information is required sometimes, but overall, it should be easy to understand. Everything should be clearly labeled, clearly explained. There is also mention of statistical analysis, which if you watched my previous videos is a pretty important step, just so you know that the results are significant. They're not like a fluke, they're not up to chance, and they are like statistically significant. And then this is good because it clearly mentions what statistical tests they used, how they did it, what software they did. Fucking RStudio, my favorite. But anyway, so yes, statistical analysis, even in R, very important steps. So good that they mentioned that, as well as like how they did it, and you can, if you so choose, find the results of that. There's also a data availability section, so if you really want to, you could find the raw data of the study, even though it's really boring and really annoying and it sucks to go through. If you so chose, you could get the full raw data. That is before any analysis has been done, before it's been organized. It's just the straight numbers, the straight results. So that's always good to have. That's a credible paper because, if you go and look for it, you can find exactly what they did. And if you really wanted to, for some reason, I don't know why you would, you could reanalyze it with your own analysis and see if you come to the same conclusions off of the raw data. I don't know why you would, because that sucks. And finally, there's in-text citations wherever necessary, and a full list of references with relatively up-to-date. These are from 2006, so a bit older, but they're still credible. You can go find them, you can go read them yourself. This is the only first 3 references. There were so many, but they're linked there. You can go read them. Again, not totally up to date, these are a little bit older, but you can go see where the information for this article is coming from. So yeah, if you are looking at a primary research article, or if you found the primary source linked in a news article or something, these are kind of some of the things to keep in mind when you are reading those.